Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We clearly have a very different view of this national government's budget than those expressed by government MPs in this debate. This budget is driven by the particular ideology of the National Party that includes, as an article of faith, that giving tax cuts to those who are relatively well off financially will grow the economy sufficiently to create jobs, that it is just and fair to give tax cuts that increase the incomes of those at the top while giving a very small tax cut in dollar terms to those on low or modest incomes, that it is fair to raise the GST to 15%, one of the highest consumption taxes around, and believe that the tax cuts will compensate everyone in the same way, thus not impacting on anyone unfairly, that the private sector does everything more efficiently than the state sector. They forget the many failures, that the state has no business owning assets regardless of the strategic importance of those assets to New Zealand and thus to the common good, that the state sector must be kept small, and if it grows in size with a larger population or growing needs of our society, that needs to be cut as a matter of priority, that citizens experience problems of living primarily because of the choices they make, and thus National takes a pathological approach to the personal issues people face. Hence the adoption of a punitive approach to citizens who experience problems regardless of what science tells us. Mr. Speaker, these are a few of the principles that drive this national government and its major support party act. And there are many others, but that will suffice for the purposes of this debate. Pursuing its ideology over the last three budgets has actually created problems for this national government, which a future Labour-led government will have to address. Mr. Speaker, let's look at some of those principles and where it has led this government, facts that the national government refuses to accept. The government has created a huge financial hole for itself by giving billions of dollars in tax cuts over the next 4 years. It knows it will not recoup this from increases in GST as it anticipated. Mr. Speaker, while members opposite often say the tax cuts were fiscally neutral, clearly it has not been so. It's a defence of their ideology and not smart economics. This has led this national government to start a borrowing spree second to none. Their tax take is significantly lower and they have to borrow to make up for that tax shortfall. Mr. Speaker, they've also been forced into making deep cuts in expenditure to feed its ideology of tax cuts at all costs. This national government has conducted an unprincipled defence of its ideology in its ensuing programme. They have neither been courageous nor intellectually honest in accepting the impact of its policies and decisions. Every member of the national government has parroted the same message, that they inherited an economy that was a basket case and that they have no options but to embark on the agenda that has unfolded over the past 3 years. Hear that? Another parrot. There she goes. Despite what members opposite say, the public knows that the last Labour government paid the last debt, the country's debt left behind by the last national government, and saved for a rainy day. The national government could have managed through the recession with the headroom it had in the economy bequeathed to it by the last government if it was smart about it, but it wasn't. Mr. Speaker, they were not smart. They insisted on tax cuts against all common sense. And now it has to preside over deep cuts to public service, record borrowing, asset sales, slashing KiwiSaver, and many broken promises. So who would want to trust them? And anybody on this side? No. Mr. Speaker, the intellectual dishonesty that pervades this budget and the rhetoric surrounding it was best described by John Armstrong of the New Zealand Herald when he cast its growth projections as, and I quote, a fairy tale of high hopes on a frayed thread. Mr. Speaker, that description actually fits the rest of the budget indeed. The projection that the economy will return to surplus in 2013 is based on hope, unjustified optimism, and magic, not reality. I wonder how many members of the national government will give an undertaking, and I'm looking, to resign when this projection is not realised. Any? Not one. They are silent, Mr. Speaker. Did you hear somebody? Well, that member will be long gone. Long gone. Maybe the member come back and apologize publicly. The national government has not adequately explained in its responses to questions from my colleagues this week, including those of its projections for the number of jobs created, about the difference in tax take projections between the Treasury and revenue, about the fact that it is borrowing to fund the impact of its tax cuts. Indeed, this is a fairy tale of high hopes on a frayed thread. So, Mr. Speaker, the position taken on this budget by the Labour opposition is based on a different narrative about our society. It is one that believes the wealth and resources of our country are created by all its people and the benefits accrue to them on a just basis. Our narrative is based on our conviction that New Zealand is a great society in which we can all do well and in which we all contribute to the maximum our abilities permit. It is based on our conviction that we ought to invest in the generation to follow us and to leave them all in the best place possible to take this country to new and greater heights. So, Mr. Speaker, how does this budget impact on children? This national government is used to saying that it has taken the hard edges off the effects of the recession and clearly believes it has done enough. It has not. While adults might be able to withstand short-term hardships, children can't, because for them time takes a different dimension. The development stages that children go through are time-sensitive, and they have only one opportunity at brain development in the early years, only one opportunity at bonding and forming trusting relationships in the early years, only one opportunity at learning how to learn in the early years, only one opportunity in meeting health milestones, and only one opportunity at being placed on a positive development pathway in the early years. Mr. Speaker, children cannot park their development needs until the economy improves. We have to make sacrifices for them now. This national government has no long-term appreciation of the needs of children and the families that care for them. If it did, then indeed some of its current policies are on parents and work would be different. Mr. Speaker, failure to achieve these time-critical development milestones leads children to a life of catching up, something that too many never achieve. These are the ones that populate our negative statistics and impose a heavy financial and emotional cost on the rest of society. In 3 budgets, the national government has presided over a number of developments that impact directly and indirectly on our children, including a significant rate of unemployment, rising rates of child abuse that they don't know what to do with, more and more people struggling to balance their budgets and cope with increases in the cost of living, rising youth unemployment, a growing underclass, and fewer opportunities to be healthy. Cost of living increases are now playing havoc on families, especially those with young children. Mr. Speaker, there is clear evidence that poverty and hardship is increasing in our families. Cost of visiting a doctor is beyond many. Cost of early childhood education has increased. Cost of renting has increased, and the steep increases in ACC affects many families. Mr. Speaker, cosmetic changes in services to children and families here and there do not constitute a well-thought-out policy on the needs of our children and the families who care for them. In fact, this budget does the opposite. It confounds the development needs. If this is the best this government can do, then it stands accused of lacking courage, foresight and awareness of what makes for a strong nation in which we lift the life chances of all citizens, especially our most vulnerable. There is little that is ethical about constantly laying the development challenges of the current climate at the foot of the previous government. There is little gain in some members constantly promoting the mantra that only the private sector produces jobs and therefore the interests of business are paramount. Mr. Speaker, if our families do not produce the thinkers, developers and workers of tomorrow, the owners of capital will not have anyone to assist them to extract profit from investments. While the national government talks about balance, nothing could be further from the truth when it comes to the development frame it is using. Mr. Speaker, clearly there are 2 narratives around this budget. While Labour believes the economy should advantage all our citizens, especially our most vulnerable, this government still believes in laissez-faire capitalism and the unjustified reliance on the market for everything. Labour will demonstrate in the election campaign its response to the needs of our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well spoken. Chris Tremaine.